Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. So if you've been watching my channel, you know that I'm a big fan of live albums. After all, I turned 60 this year, and I was around, certainly in the 70s was really my generation, the early, mid-80s. Those were prime periods for artists and bands to release live albums. And it's just a great summation of a career. If you're a fan of the band, here you are in one package, hopefully a double album. You're getting, a lot of their best stuff and maybe jamming in different ways, and the interaction of the audience just could be a great experience. A great live album to me is fantastic. But what about the flip side of that? And that's what I thought about when I was at work today, and I said, I got to go home and do a video on this. A live album is a great way to get into a band. You don't know them, you know their name, you know a couple of their songs. You pick up a live album, and now you get a good summation of that band. It's a great way to investigate a band. Now, because of my computer database, it's all in there. Every album I own that's in my database, 5,000 of them, not only do I have when they came out, I have when they bought them. So I was able to sort it, and there it is. I got about 75 albums that were the first albums that I bought by that band. It was my introduction. So I looked on YouTube before. I don't see anybody doing this, and it's kind of hard to come up with a name. So I'm going to call it the favorite introductory live albums. These live albums were the first albums I bought by that band. They got me into the band, and of course I got into more of their albums. Kind of a clever idea, right? So let's get into it. It's a long video, and I don't want to do it in one video. So this is the first time ever I'm going to split it into two. So this is going to be part one, and I'm going to do in alphabetical order. I'm not ranking them because I already did live album videos. In fact, check them out. I'll try to put them in the link. I already did 2 videos. My top 16 live albums of all time. I'm looking at my cheat sheet here. And then I did one, albums 17 through 44. Those were 2 videos I did previously. I also did a big Rolling Stones live video. So I don't need to rank them. Alphabetical order, these were the first albums I ever got by these artists, and they were live albums. So I hope you enjoy it. If you're new to my channel, or you're not new but you never subscribed, please hit subscribe. Help my channel to grow. I just hit 1,000, which is very exciting, and I hope it'll continue to grow. All right, let's start here. Now, a lot of these I had on vinyl, of course, now they're on CD. This is one that I had on vinyl. Remember this band, Angel? And this is a nice copy of this on BGO Records. This is a double CD, the complete album. And this is the Angel album live without a net. That was the first Angel album I ever bought, and a really good, it did exactly what it was, double live album, good introduction for this fine band from the 70s, Angel. This, the next one, is really one of my favorite live albums of all time, and it is the band, the Last Waltz. Now I have up there the deluxe box set, but we're going to go with the original album, which was a triple vinyl. And here it is on 2 CD sets. Now, of course, I knew the band. I just never owned any of their albums. And when I saw the movie and I bought the soundtrack to the Last Waltz, and of course there's other artists on here, but there's no doubt that the highlight of this set is the band. I mean, I think it's still probably my favorite band album. And yeah, I just think it's amazing. And this is what got me really big into the band, the Last Waltz. One of my all-time favorite live albums, for sure. Another one, this was number 18 on my all-time favorite list. Bebop Deluxe, Live in the Air Age. Another great live album from Bill Nelson and Bebop Deluxe. This is still my favorite Bebop Deluxe album. And this was the first Bebop Deluxe album I ever got. Live in the Air Age, that is a great one. This one more recent, a few years ago, was top 3 album of the year for me. Blackberry Smoke, I'm a big fan of Southern rock, and this was a live CD, a double live CD called Leave a Scar. I had heard about them, read about them, didn't know any of their songs, picked up this double CD and was blown away. I was like, thank God Southern rock is still going strong, and now I've picked up almost all of their other albums. But this was the one that was my gateway into Blackberry Smoke. Leave a Scar Live, North Carolina, from Blackberry Smoke. Now, I'm a big fan of Blue Oyster Cult. I have everything. And, of course, everybody knows Godzilla and all their classics, obviously. But believe it or not, buying their albums, I was late to the game. The very first Blue Oyster Cult live album was a live one. It wasn't Agents of Fortune, It was this one called Extraterrestrial Live, which is their live record when they were touring for Fire of Unknown Origin, which is an amazing album. So this, to this day, is my favorite live album by Blue Oyster Cult. And shockingly enough, was my very first album that I ever bought from them. I think it was around 82. Then I went back, got Agents of Fortune right away, and all the other albums. My very first David Bowie album. I got two the same year. Diamond Dogs, but this was the first one. David Live, which was from the Diamond Dogs tour. I still have tremendous feelings over this album. This, of course, is the newer CD version, which is amazing. It's got some bonus tracks and sounds better than ever on CD than on the vinyl. But this was my very first David Bowie album. David Bowie Live, David Live at the Tower Theater of Philadelphia. I think an incredible record. A lot of people gave that shitty reviews when it came out, but they don't know what they're talking about. It's great. My first Johnny Cash albums were these remastered CDs. I got them both at the same time. They go hand in hand. Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison and Johnny Cash at San Quentin. Just great classic concerts. I was very late to the game with Johnny Cash, but I got these and fell in love with them. And then picked up more stuff. Harry Chapin, my very first Harry Chapin album was his live record called Greatest Stories Live. I picked it up on vinyl. This is the CD version, which is actually missing a track. But this is an incredible album. I still think it's Harry Chapin's best album to this date. It's amazing. Love it. Harry Chapin, Greatest Stories Live, my first Harry Chapin album. Now, of course, I knew Cheap Trick growing up, and of course, Budokan took over the world. But I did not buy Budokan when it came out. I found the big hit. I couldn't stand that. I Want You to Want Me. It was a really annoying song, and I loved Love Surrender. But I never bought any Cheap Trick albums until I got this one called Silver. I just bought it. It was a double CD. I looked at it. I'm like, well, this is going to be a great way to get into them. It's got their latter hits like The Flame and Can't Stop Falling in Love and If You Want My Love, She's Tight. Just a great mix. And I was blown away. I was like, this is a phenomenal live record. Then I went back, got their first three albums and Budokan and Budokan 2 and a lot of their other stuff. But this is my gateway to Cheap Trick, late to the game with Silver. This is a band, I saw this live album. Figured I'd check it out, and I couldn't believe how much I loved it. The Corrs. VH1 presents The Corrs live in Dublin. It has Bono guesting. It has Ron Wood guesting. A couple of tracks, but that's not why it's so great. It's so great because it's so great. Oh my God, they sound fantastic. The songs are great. I couldn't believe how much I loved this CD, and I still do. The Corrs. VH1 presents The Corrs live in Dublin. Great CD, and that was my first Corrs album. Am I missing anything? I think I skipped this one. I'm not the biggest Glen Campbell fan, but this was my very first Glen Campbell album on vinyl. Still have it on vinyl. Glen Campbell Live. It's kind of hokey, kind of Vegas-y like, but it's really good. And I had to have it. I bought it really because of his version of The Impossible Dream, the classic song from Man of La Mancha. But it's great. Glen Campbell Live. My first Glen Campbell album. I don't have a ton of Glen Campbell, but that's a really good one. Let's keep going. The letter D. Similar situation. I'm not the biggest John Denver fan, but you have to have something by him. And this is his very famous album, An Evening with John Denver. And this is a deluxe reissue on 2 CDs. And kind of like that Glen Campbell. I can only take it in small bits, but it's great to have his great song, because obviously some of his songs are great. John Denver, right there. Now, my first Emerson, Lake and Palmer album was back in 1974 when they released this guy. They're triple vinyl, now on 2 CDs. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Ladies and gentlemen, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And it's still a phenomenal album. And this was my very first Emerson, Lake and Palmer album. This is not a cheat. I bought these both albums the same day. I heard a lot about Rory Gallagher. Didn't have any of his albums. Didn't know too many of his songs because not like in the United States he ever gets any kind of play. But everybody who's a rock fan heard about Irish Tour. Didn't know about Live in Europe. So I was like, the hell with it. I'm just going to buy them both. And these are digitally remastered with bonus tracks. And yep, I was blown away. Got them the same day. Here's my gateway into the great Rory Gallagher. And then, of course, after getting these two, I ended up picking up a whole bunch of his other stuff. Still love him. Rory Gallagher. Big fan of Geils Band. You know, I've been rooting that they should get into the Hall of Fame, and this was my gateway to the Geils Band, one of the greatest live albums of all time from one of the greatest live bands of all time. Full House. And this is the digitally remastered version. I did have it, of course, initially on vinyl. Sounds better here. And I just love this album. This thing is just a screaming, great performance. Following year, I picked up their double one, Blow Your Face Out, which was great. What did I skip? The letter F. Let's go back. This is Focus. And this was my very first Focus album, Focus Live at the Rainbow. I do not have it on CD yet. And there it is. Great stuff. It's got Hocus Pocus and Sylvia and Eruption. Great stuff from Focus. Great live record. And it's another one. That was my first one, but I've definitely gone on and picked up a bunch of other stuff. I did a video just on this album, Frampton Comes Alive. The video is Why Frampton Comes Alive is the greatest live album of all time. Don't snicker. Check out the video. It is the greatest live album of all time, I'm telling you. Check out my analysis. But there you have it. Frampton Comes Alive. The very first pressing, and that was my first Frampton album. Like for most people, that was the gateway to Peter Frampton, and it's still an incredible live album. Let's go back to G where I left off. Gentle Giant. Now this is on a twofer. I actually bought their live album called Playing the Fool decades ago and didn't like it. I couldn't handle it. I was too young. Their music was much too difficult and I just couldn't deal with it. And that was the end of Gentle Giant for decades. And it's only the last couple of years that I've been inching my way into Gentle Giant. In my archives down there, I have a backlog of Gentle Giant albums that I haven't gotten to yet because I can still only take them in certain bits. But Live Playing the Fool is their live record. And that was the very first Gentle Giant album I ever bought, even though I couldn't deal with it. Here's one from this year. My very first Golden Earring album. Never had anything by them. Know their songs, a couple of them. But this one I picked up by chance to Naked Truth, which is an acoustic live album. We've talked about this, some of our my viewers watching my videos. Really good. Kind of unplugged performance. I really like it. I'll be getting more into Golden Earring. How about this monster? Gov't Mule. This was my first Gov't Mule album, The Deepest End, live in concert. This is like a mini box set. You got 1, 2, 3 discs. Just a lot of music as you would expect from Gov't Mule. And but this one has a lot of guests. You can see Les Claypool, Jack Cassidy, Mike Gordon from Fish. A lot of guests. A huge, long performance from Gov't Mule. We'll keep going. Also, number 16 on my all-time favorite list was this one, the concert from Bangladesh, George Harrison and Friends. This was really my first George Harrison album, which is why it's here. Now, of course, this is not just George Harrison, but for me, it was my first George Harrison album. So that's why it's here, the concert from Bangladesh. We'll keep going. Head East. And this is my first album from them called Live on Stage, which is kind of a bastardized version of their official live vinyl record. They mix up the tracks, cut it a little bit short, but it's a fun record from Head East. My very first Hot Tuner album, one of my favorites for sure. This was number 28 on my all-time list, and that is Double Dose. And had it on vinyl, now on CD. Great. You know, you got a mixture of the acoustic stuff and the jamming stuff and the electric stuff. This is great Hot Tuner. And also one of my all-time favorites, number 27 on the list, was Humble Pie and Performance Rockin' the Fillmore. Peter Frampton and band, Steve Marriott, And you talk about live, this album like a Geils Band live. This thing, you feel like you're at that concert. And especially side 1 and side 4, I don't need the doctor. Boy, is that smoking. Humble Pie. Another one, Ian Hunter, Welcome to the Club. I actually saw this show. Not that very live out, not this recording, but I saw that tour. And he was red hot. That was the Schizophrenic album came out. And this is a terrific live record with a side that's of studio stuff as well. But this is a great performance. Ian Hunter was my very first album. Then I picked up You Never Alone with a Schizophrenic after this. So there you go. Ian Hunter right there. We'll keep going. David Johansen. And I'm not the biggest fan of his or the New York Dolls, but this is a fun live record called Live It Up. And this is when he was at his commercial peak at that time. And this is a great mixture of tracks, including Build Me Up a Buttercup he had a hit with. Live It Up on vinyl from David Johansen. We're up to the letter K, and this great progressive band, hope these don't fall, Karnataka and Strange Behavior. Not one of these smaller kind of bands that didn't really make it onto the big stage, but they should have because they're tremendously talented. A great band, like a Mostly Autumn type of a band. And Karnataka, Strange Behavior was a top 3 album for me in that year. This is a perfect example of how to get into a band. I didn't know anything by them, bought this double CD, fell in love with it. And that's great. Let's keep going. The very first Kinks album I ever bought was this one, Everybody's in Showbiz. Now, this is a bit of a cheat because it was a double vinyl album, and one album was studio and one was live. But it counts. It was my very first Kinks album, and it's not my favorite live Kinks album. I prefer the studio stuff on here much better, but there you go. Now, I was late to the game on this to a certain extent, but my first Kiss album, like most people's, was Kiss Alive. Now, most of my friends back then loved Kiss. They said they were the greatest, and I would not give them the time of day because they were clearly about the makeup and the show, and I would not take them seriously. I was a bit stuck up in my opinion, but eventually I caved and went out and got this album. I was like, you know what, this is a pretty damn fun album, and it is. I don't think it's as good as a lot of people think it is, but yeah, I really like it. Kiss Alive was my first Kiss album. Much better for me was this one. This is Little Feat and their classic double live record. This has expanded on this CD, Waiting for Columbus. This one's got a bunch of previously unreleased outtakes and stuff like that. This is just an amazing live album. I think it's the best Little Feat ever, and I have a lot of Little Feat, but I don't think they ever did better than this album. So there you have it, Spanish Moon. Oh, I did that. That's in my favorite best bass lines of all time. Waiting for Columbus from Little Feat. Let's keep going with Loggins Messina. My first album from then was this double album, and this is the one that's called On Stage, and this is nice. First time on CD, digitally mastered. It's got a lot of great stuff on it. Acoustic stuff like House of Pooh Corner, Danny's Song, and a lot of jamming on there as well. 21 minutes of Havala, but good stuff from Loggins and Messina. Let's keep going. My very first Nils Lofgren album, and I have a Nils Lofgren video because I'm a huge fan, but this was my first one from Columbia House Record Club, Night After Night. A great summation of his career up until that point, which was up through I Came to Dance in 1977. In actual fact, I got this and I Came to Dance at the same exact time. But this is the album I fell in love with. And it's still a favorite Nils Lofgren album for me. And that leaves one left in the letter L, and that's this. My very first Leonard Skynyrd album was their classic live one, One More from the Road. This is the 25th Anniversary Deluxe Edition, as you can see. And it's got some bonus tracks, another version of Freebird, and another version of a lot of the songs. But this is a smoking live album, as you know. That's why it's a classic. So there you have it, A through L, Part 1 of my favorite introductory live albums. think about for you, what albums, what bands did you get into by buying their live album? Maybe you only knew one song, maybe you didn't know anything. But that's what the point of this video is, and I think it's kind of a cool concept. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, please hit like, check out my other videos. Again, I have 2 videos in there where I choose my top 16 live albums. This was my notes when I sorted it. Then I did a follow-up video of my favorite live albums of all time, part 2, albums number 17 through 44. I think you might like it. And if you like the Rolling Stones, definitely check out my video on the Rolling Stones live albums, because I got a ton of them, as you can see. Anyway, thanks again. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay involved. Please send your comments. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your loyalty and the community. And I will do part 2 maybe tomorrow or the next day. But thanks so much. See you next time.